Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. Alayhi salatullah. So what I'm going to do is a kind of dance with music of the soul, in particular, Sidi's commentary on the Walifa. I'll say some things, I'll read a little bit from the commentary on the Walifa. I'll say more things. We'll take questions throughout. Maybe Jannah feels like saying something, she might say something too. We'll see. But to kind of give you a little bit of background for what I'll be talking about, as I see the walking on the path, there are really two basic things that we're doing. One is we're attempting to go closer to God, go closer to Allah, and everything that means. In other words, to dive into the ocean of love, let it flood into us, to discover the unity that underlies our being. So that's one thing, and to be filled with that. The other thing is that there's a kind of perk that comes with that. But it doesn't come automatically. You have to do a little bit of work too. It's that we live in the world, and this path of Islam, this path of Sufism, is that not only are we offered this unending sea of love, this unending possibility of unending connection with God, with Allah, but also we're directed to bring it into the world and into our lives, so that this flood of mercy gives us two things essentially about the world. It increases the likelihood that we'll have wisdom, more wisdom for dealing with all of the situations that we face in the world. Not only does it increase the likelihood that we will have enhanced wisdom, but it will also increase the likelihood that we will have more energy to pursuing what wisdom dictates we should follow. And along with that energy comes healing and so on. It doesn't guarantee, simply by accessing the mercy, by allowing this flood of the sea of love to come into our being, it doesn't guarantee that we will necessarily make all the right decisions and have wisdom. It increases the likelihood. I'll later on explain why it increases the likelihood. But also it increases the likelihood that we will have more energy. The basic reason for that is because then our energy gets less blocked off by the pictures of the nafs. And I'll explain what I mean by that later on. So these two areas, engaging in effort, our primary effort is to open up the channel between us and love, between us and God, And our secondary form of effort is that channel becomes opened, we are better able to make wiser decisions in the world and to pursue. We have greater energy, increase the likelihood we'll have greater energy to do what wisdom is directing us to do. And the basic reason why those two go hand in hand is that the nafs, the self that compels us to, at the lowest level, that compels us to do evil or to perceive things in an evil, negative, self-destructive, and sometimes a way that's destructive to others. The power of this nafs, which rests on conditional love, which rests on us fulfilling what it imagines, what the nafs has been conditioned to believe will lead us to fulfillment, all of that belief structure becomes undercut when you access the unconditional, ongoing mercy that is at the core of who you are, but which we have lost access to for the most part. We've choked ourselves off from that because we bought into the belief structure of our commanding, compelling self, which worked to get us this far in our life, but barely. Many of us are kind of hanging on by a thread. We get a few drops of this mercy, but we deserve more than just what the nafs, what the commanding, compelling self, what our egos have led us to. And so the more we access this unconditional mercy that lies at our core, this then weakens the pictures, the belief structures of the nafs, the conditioning of the nafs. And so we're able to see outside the box of the nafs, outside possibilities beyond what our genetic programming, what our early childhood conditioning have trained us to believe we needed. So that's kind of the overall structure of what I'm going to be talking about, linking it up to some essential teachings in the Quran and the Wadhifa. In particular, the way the Wadhifa, the door the Wadhifa opens up, is that over and over again through the Wadhifa, the door of who we are is opened up very clearly to us. And who are we? See, was talking last night about the perfection. We are all of the divine qualities. We are the mirror of all of the divine qualities. We are made in the image of God. A statement which we find both in the Hebrew Bible as well as in the Hadith of Muhammad. We're made in the image of God. So the whole point of the Wadhifa, like in the daily weird, when we say, Allahumma salli, O Allah, salli, which the translation, we translate as send blessings, but when we just go into this, we discover, as he says in his commentary, we discover that send blessings upon the Prophet means far more than what the English would lead us to believe it means. To send blessings upon the Prophet literally actually means establish a felt connection. Establish a felt connection between me and not only the historical prophet, but with the Muhammadan reality, which is this all-inclusive primordial nature that all of us have in common, in which we mirror all of the divine qualities. That's who we are. Maybe you heard this before, but you might have forgotten it from time to time. You think you are you, but you're much more than you. You are just the surface of who you are. The you that you normally think you are is the surface, just one iota, one small fragment. The we that we normally think we are is just one small fragment of who we really are, which is this amazing rainbow, this crown, studded with all of the jewels of the divine qualities, through which everything of existence comes into being. It's not just hippies that like rainbows, are rainbows. We are all rainbows beneath the surface, but we've choked off the rainbow part of our existence. We had to scrap, I think that's the right word, to scrap, to fight, to survive. We ran away from fear. We aggressively tried to hold on to some goal and pursue some goal. Or we tried to get rid of fear as hard as we could. But unfortunately, beginning with whenever it was that our genetic programming was really kicked in, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years ago, we were programmed to choke out that unconditional mercy. It didn't lead to our survival. We had to run away from those weird people coming over the next rise, or we had to fight them or die. And it was important to do that, but we choked, we held on to ourself too much. And then that, of course, was compounded by whatever conditioning that we received when we were young, built upon that earlier genetic conditioning. Now, you might have heard this stuff in psychology classes and things like that, but it's important to understand what the connection of that is to Sufism, to the Quran. Basically, it goes back to the story of before time began, when Allah says to the angels, I'm going to put my representative on the earth. I'm going to put you on the earth. Because this is before creation begins. But creation begins not just at the beginning of time. Creation begins at each moment. We come into being at each moment. So Allah says to the angels, right now, as well as back in what we translate as pre-eternity, or eternity before time began. Right now, as time is about to begin, Allah says to the angels, I'm going to place my representative on earth. What does that mean? Well, the term is Khalifa, representative, from which we get the word California, believe it or not. It's no joke, actually. I read it in an Automobile Club magazine 10 years ago.
All right.
It was a kind of popularization of a scholarly article. It goes by way of Spain, the way Spanish, really, seriously. The word California, the etymology of it. But anyway, because it was named by California, whatever Spanish explorer named it in the name of our regent, vice regent or something like that, Khalifa. And the Arabic word had gone into Spanish and so on. But what does this mean to be God's representative? It means we're the mirror image of God. We carry into being all of the divine qualities in microcosm, in a mirror image. So, on the one hand, when we do the qualities, that's one way of getting in touch with this aspect of our nature, which is the Khalifa, the primordial nature. The fitra is another term. Fitra means the primordial nature. That everyone carries with them as we come into being, both when you were born and also right now. You might have lived a really messed up life up to now, historically, from when you were born. The fact is, though, because we're created at each moment again, at this moment, no matter what you did before, this moment, you come into being carrying this pure fitra, all of the divine qualities mirrored in us. But we have a lot of inertia, a lot of past history, so that even though at each moment we come in, we're born again, each moment we come into being fresh, we carry with us all of these pictures, all of this history. And so you might read about this, that you have this pure nature. Somebody like me might be saying it, you might read it in CD's books, CD will say it, but it doesn't mean much. Because as soon as we say that, then your mind is filled with who you think you are. All of what you've done, all the thoughts you have, whatever you happen to be feeling right now. So one of the points of the path of Sufism in particular, Islam in general and Sufism in particular, is how to take the mess of your life and immediately see the jewel beneath the surface of it. See how the mercy, taste the mercy that lies beneath the surface of our lives, and see how that's coming into our life. But the problem, aside from all of this history that I talked about, is that from a Quranic perspective, even though we have this tremendous purity going for us, that we're the representative of Allah, problem is that there's a pretty strong voice of Shaitaan. In the Quran, the voice Shaitaan looks at Adam when Allah says, I'm going to put my representative on earth, and I've taught him all of my names, meaning I've embodied in the human being, I've embodied in each human being all of the divine names. Because as you know, to teach simply by conveying words, that's just one very minor level of teaching. Deep teaching is when you have embodied it. So don't think simply because when Allah says in the Quran, Allah taught Adam all the names, it was like, I'm going to teach you right now, in A, B, C. No. God taught Adam all of the names in a deep teaching by putting it into the being of Adam. So Allah says this to the angels, and Shaitaan is there. And Allah says, so recognize this to the angels. Recognize who this human being is, really. He's my representative, the infinite manifest in physical form, mirrored in physical form. And so Allah says, prostrate. By prostrating, what is meant is humbly accepting, humbly recognizing this. But of course, as he told us, and you've read, Shaitaan says, no way, I'm made of fire and Adam is clay. Now, if we were to put that into more kind of everyday speech today, what would Shaitaan say? What would Satan say to Adam? Would he say, you're just made of clay? I don't think today, because clay doesn't kind of have that connotation today. What I came up with was Shaitaan would say, he's scum. Adam is scum. Now, you may have a better term. But we hear that. We hear that voice. And we say it to ourselves. We unconsciously say it to ourselves. We hear, you are made in the image of God. You are the most unbelievable being in existence. God being beyond existence. But as far as existence goes, you are the most unbelievable being. Not in the sense that you can't believe it, but marvelous, the most marvelous being in existence. You mirror the infinite. And then we respond by saying, oh, come on. Come on, I'm just nothing. I'm scum. Where do we get that? Well, the Quran says we get it from Shaitaan. Your parents might have also told you that, or your teachers might have told you that when you didn't meet their standards, when you didn't meet their conditions. And that word conditions there is very important. It's the whole structure of the nafs involves a set of conditions that we've learned work for us to a degree when we can fulfill them. Our life is fine as long as it's not fill in the blank. Boring, as long as we're not tired, as long as we're not ill, as long as we understand, as long as we feel good, just fill in the blank. Whatever conditions the nafs has, just that is what we have trained ourselves in. Shaitaan and our parents, teachers, society has trained us to believe we need in order to feel good. In contrast, Allah says, in and of yourself, you are a marvel. You are a Khalifa, a representative of all of God's qualities. another thing. Shaitaan just doesn't leave it at that. You're scum. Because if he just left it at that, we wouldn't buy into his argument. We wouldn't accept it. It's too much. Instead, he says, you're scum, but if you don't want to be scum, you can be like me, a kind of God. If you don't want to be scum, as long as you fulfill these conditions, you'll be great. And so what happens is we accept that, because being scum is not particularly cool. We'd rather not be scum. And so we unconsciously cut ourselves off from the unconditional mercy and choke off the unconditional mercy and grab onto ourself, what we've learned, one by one, the things that meet the conditions of Shaitaan, that meet the conditions of that we learned make us feel good and enable us not to feel bad. That litany of conditions is the trade-off. When we meet the litany of those conditions, or hope to meet the litany of those conditions, that's the trade-off for choking off the unconditional mercy. Because when we do meet those conditions, or hope to meet those conditions, then it's like, I'm okay. I've met those conditions. I got that A on that test. That guy or that girl smiled at me. I feel okay. I finally made $15 an hour. I sold my first BMW, whatever the conditions are. We then, when we meet those or hope to meet those, then we taste a little bit of the mercy, but we're still unconsciously choking off unconditional mercy.